Our world wasn't always like this. My grandparents have told me stories about days of freedom and independence, an age where everybody had something special about them and were able to share their unique something with the rest of the world. There were musicians, artists, and writers creating incredible pieces of art, music, and literature. There were magicians, jugglers, and actors willing to perform for large crowds of people. Everyone was happy and carefree, loving life and doing what they could to savor the good times. However, that all changed when a deranged doctor showed up out of nowhere with a series of devices to eliminate all that. He used the devices to destroy the independence of our people and mutate animals, all while leaving the cities in ruins. The once beautiful landscape of our planet had been reduced to a wasteland, leaving behind nothing but soil with barely enough nutrients to grow fruit and crops. The once diverse culture of people has been replaced with people that wear the same clothes, eat the same things day in and day out. Anyone who doesn't live by this lifestyle is frowned upon and punished by our dictator, the doctor. My grandparents were the only ones with knowledge of the days before the doctor. They had to be kept in hiding so they couldn't be executed. The doctor didn't want anyone to know the truth of the world's past and how he rose to power. So he began a secret worldwide campaign to get rid of all of who had memories of that age. To escape the clutches of the doctor, my grandparents began to live with us, and it was in our basement where they found salvation. I would go down there every day to visit them and give them their meals. We would talk about the age of independence before I went back upstairs. They would always tell me the same thing. You're destined to do great things. What they are is up to you. Those words have been ringing in my head since they passed away. It's been 5 years since they died. And I have been wondering what great things I'd be doing. I wasn't sure until that fateful day. I was walking in the market getting some fruit for my parents when I heard an uproar happening on the south side of the square. I rushed over to where the commotion was. Pushing my way through the crowd of people, once I made it to the front of the crowd, I saw two people having rope tied around their necks. People seemed to approve of the hanging of these people, throwing mud at them and calling them horrible names like traitorous swine. That's when I realized the two people being hung were wearing tie-dye suits. They must have been protesting against the doctor by going out in public and wearing bright rainbow-stained suits. The crowd was hushed as the executor walked towards the lever on the right side of the platform. Wrapping his hand around the lever, he paused for a few seconds as one of the protesters began to yell at him. You may take our lives, but you'll never take away our independence, you bat! He never got to finish that sentence as the executor pulled the lever and the two protesters dropped below the platform. You could hear their necks snap as their bodies fell. They just hung there afterwards, cold and lifeless. A crowd applauded and cheered as the protesters were sent to their deaths. A few minutes passed, and the commotion died down. I stood there staring at the protesters. My grandparents' words repeated in my head. You're destined to do great things. What they are is up to you. I knew what I had to do. I had to repel against the doctor and start a revolution. I stayed up late that night planning my scheme. I needed to know how to start it, how to get everyone's attention. I had a few ideas in my head, but I couldn't choose which one to use. I'd have to give it more thought during the day before I make my decision. All I could do was lay on my tattered bed, wide awake, hoping to fall asleep soon. The next day, my parents brought me to a restaurant in the square for lunch. It had recently opened, and it was very popular for some reason. Usually, restaurants aren't allowed to be built unless approved by the doctor himself. It rarely happens, so the food there must have been amazing to get past him. It even had an all-day breakfast, something my father loved. I think the main reason it got approved and my parents wanted to eat there was because the restaurant served meat. The animals mutated because of the doctor's devices and weren't allowed to be eaten, as it would kill anyone who would eat their flesh. However, the restaurant found a way to cleanse that meat of that harsh chemicals in order to make them edible. We sat down at our table and began to look through the menu. After a few minutes, a waiter came to take our orders. I ordered the traditional breakfast, weary of what it would taste like. From what I saw, everyone seemed to love that dish, so I thought I'd order it. 25 minutes passed, and we finally got our food. All three of us ordered the same thing, the traditional breakfast. I looked down at my plate, and what I saw didn't help my appetite. The meat, along with the hen buds, was discolored, having what appeared to be a light greenish hue to them. The bread was normal, but the rest looked distasteful. My parents began to eat right away and looked like they were enjoying it a lot. I picked up my knife and cut into the meat. It was tender and juicy, so I thought it wouldn't be as bad as I thought it would be. I put the piece I cut off into my mouth and began to chew. My eyes widened as I reached my napkin and spat out the meat. It tasted horrid, like someone marinated it in sewage. I decided to eat the hen buds next. I began to eat a forkful and spat on it just as fast. It tasted worse than the meat. I grabbed the bread to cleanse my mouth of that disgusting taste. I ate it slowly, as I could pretend I was full when I ate both slices. That night I was in my bed wide awake again. Finally, I had a way to rebel against the doctor. I was going to share with the world my opinion of that restaurant's food. I was going to wear eye-catching clothing under my normal gray overcoat as I made my way to the square. Once I'm on the hanging platform, I'll rip my overcoat off, put on a hat, and shout out my opinion through a megaphone. I couldn't tell my parents about it, as they would try to stop me. It was something I had to do alone. It was 11:45 a.m. when I entered the square. I was going to rebel at noon, exactly, and nothing was going to stop me. I was doing this not only for myself, but for my grandparents and the world. The square was busy as usual, with many people talking to one another, buying whatever fruit and vegetables they could. This was the perfect day for the beginning of my revolution. I nervously waited until 11:55 to make my way to the hanging platform. Once it was time, I stood up and walked towards it. Images of the old world flashed in my head, reminding me what I was about to fight for. I saw my grandparents sitting on a park bench, watching a mother bird feed her young. I saw children playing in a grassy field, having the time of their lives. I then saw my mother and father standing in front of the statue. It was a statue of me, with a plaque saying, "In honor of the world's greatest revolutionary." Once I was on the platform, I took a deep breath as my grandparents' words repeated once again in my head. "You're destined to do great things. What they are is up to you." I ripped off my bland gray overcoat and showed off my yellow shirt and white pants. I put on my red top and pulled out my megaphone from my backpack. I turned it on and I began to speak into it. "Everyone, listen up." People in the square fell silent and began to turn in my direction, looking confused. There is more to life than simple and bland lifestyle. We can have our own unique talents and preferences if we try. It's easy to do, I assure you. A police car pulled into the square and 2 officers stepped out. They stared at me and began to walk in my direction, looking angrier than ever. I knew I had to talk fast. "Please listen to me. Rebel against the doctor and claim your independence." One of the officers swatted the megaphone from my hand and stepped on it, shattering it into pieces. He then grabbed my arm and pinned him against my back. I tried in vain to release myself, but his grasp was too strong. The other officer clenched his right hand into a fist and struck me across the face. I fell to the ground with a thud, and I began to fall unconscious. The last thing I remember was hearing the words my grandparents always told me when I would go back upstairs in my head. "You're destined to do great things. What they are is up to you." I was sitting alone in the restaurant in the square. I ordered the traditional breakfast and began to eat it eagerly once I arrived. I took a bite out of the meat and spat on it without hesitation. It tasted disgusting. I began to wipe my mouth when I saw a young man wearing a yellow shirt and white pants and a red top enter the restaurant. I recognized him. He was the same boy who rebelled against the doctor last week. He looked at me and gave me a big grin. He began to walk towards me with the same sickening smile on his face. I gave him a slight smile but frowned a split second later, hoping he would stay away from me. He stood next to my table, staring at me. I looked up at him and decided to start a conversation. "May I help you, son?" I asked him. "I am Sam. Sam I am. Do you like green eggs and ham?" Okay, now this was a really long creepypasta, and I think this might have some. I think this heavily references Dr. Seuss and the Cat in the Hat, and the green eggs and ham story. Where basically where Dr. Seuss is being portrayed as an evil maniacal doctor, probably took over the world, but that was not. He's not portrayed as that in real life. I mean, he makes all the good stories for all the kids and children who enjoy reading his books and all that. But still, this is actually a very good reference to Dr. Seuss, and well, it does kind of get onto some good points there, and how some inspiring words always catch into your head or something. But anywho, if you like the story, feel free to comment, rate, subscribe. Basically comment, rate, favorite this video, subscribe to my channel, look me up on Facebook and all that. So that means we have 3 more creepypasta videos to go. So anyways, this is Marshall Dion, signing off for now.